Welcome to Dr. B Music Theory. I'm really excited to announce that this week I launched my Patreon page for Dr. B Music Theory. What Patreon is, it's a way to give any amount of money at the beginning of every month with an automatic charge to your credit card. And what's nice is you can cancel at any time. So it's a really convenient way to support people who are creating things that you like. Now, do not worry. There's still going to be lots of free content coming straight here to YouTube. So there's going to be more Ask Dr. B Music Theory videos just like this one. That said, it's probably going to be another 3 weeks from when this one gets launched till you see the next one. And after that, they'll come about once a week. The reason there's going to be a little bit of delay is because one of the features that I'm going to have on Patreon is exclusive previews. So for 2 weeks, the next installment of Ask Dr. B About Music Theory will be on Patreon only, and then after that 2 weeks, it'll be here on YouTube for free. So if you're patient and just want to wait a little bit, you still can get everything you want right there. But if you want to get things a little bit earlier, you're going to want to support me on Patreon. Another reason to support me on Patreon is that I'm going to be creating videos exclusively only available on Patreon. And those are going to cover more broad range topics. And I put a poll where people who are supporting me can vote on what do you want me to cover next. And let me just tell you the 6 options that are up there right now. So right now we have upper structures, 9th chords, 11th chords, and 13th chords is one option. Jazz theory, counterpoint, second species, enharmonic modulation, analysis of classical pieces, and analysis of contemporary pop music. So if you want to support me on Patreon and make a vote, once I get to a certain level, I then start creating videos that are exclusive to there. So again, I'm putting a link to my Patreon account in the comments. Click on that if you're interested. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is why haven't I posted any videos to YouTube in 8 months? I feel a little bit bad about that, but I have a good reason. At the beginning of 2018 in January, I decided I was going to apply for sabbatical. And what that means is asking the college to have a year off of teaching to do some special research projects. So it took me a while to get the application together, to get all the legwork. I applied and I was granted a sabbatical. So for 2018, 2019, I'm just doing research. I'm doing research on something I've called music of the Gilded Age. So it's researching late 19th century music in mansions and on how music was patronized, specifically in the Hudson Valley, which is where I live, but anywhere that kind of music occurred is something that I'm interested in. So I'm going to put some links down in the comments. If you're interested in that, you can follow along. Hear me playing saxophone in these mansions. I'm making documentaries about the whole event. It's actually pretty exciting. Well, I'm super excited about it. But if music theory is your thing, you don't need to check it out. It's all good. So in addition to being able to do that, I'm going to have more time to be doing Dr. B Music Theory, which is why you're going to be able to start expecting about a video once a week, maybe every other week at the latest. So I'm excited to be able to do that. The other reason I wasn't able to post is as part of my sabbatical, I had a European trip this summer. So I went to Zagreb, Croatia, and Vienna, Austria, and I gave a lecture and a performance called Gilded Age America. Carol Florio and the Vanderbilts was a composer who wrote for the Vanderbilt family, one of the wealthiest families in late 19th century America. And it was great. Now, while I was in Europe, it was really awesome to meet one of my fans of Dr. B Music Theory. He had been watching my videos, and I had posted that I was going to be going to Europe and going to Zagreb, and he said, "Hey, Dr. B, that's where I live. Let me show you around," which was great. So I met Andrew Norris, who has been using these videos to help him in creating music for documentaries about this village in Croatia where there's like no running water, there's no electricity. It's almost from a different time. He's interviewing people, telling all these fascinating stories, but he's been using the music theory videos to help him with his composing for his documentaries. I'm going to put a link in the comments for that too. So there's a lot of extra stuff you can look at if you're interested. Now, Andrew submitted a question. I figured the best place to start would be to answer one of his questions. So let me grab that right here. And so Andrew writes, "Hello, Dr. B. Here's a question which confuses me, but I felt sure you would know the answer. I'm using the wonderful book Tonal Harmony by Koska. I think you know it. There is a modulation exercise on page 296 with an extract of Bach, Jesu, Jesu, du bist mein. The key signature has 2 flats, yet it states the key as C minor, and the modulation to E flat occurs at bar 5. When you put the Roman numerals under the chords, it makes sense. The first chord is a 1 chord, C minor tonic. I then went to YouTube to find a recording of it, and someone has made a very colorful analysis, but entirely in E flat. And the first and final chords are listed as 6 submedian. Firstly, is this a mistake? Secondly, what is the reason for writing one key signature when the opening and concluding chords suggest a different one? Thanks in advance for any light you can shed on this. All the best, Andrew." So, good question, Andrew. So, I'm going to start by answering question number 2 first. I'm not exactly sure why Bach has it with 2 flats instead of 3 flats. So I have the excerpt right here behind me. It's written with 2 flats. And I did a little research, and the chorale, there's a series, there's a great website with lots of Bach chorales. I'll put a link for that as well in the comments. But sometimes the reason you'll have a different key signature than what the passages is because it's part of a larger work. And the beginning of the piece is in the appropriate key signature, but the excerpt that you're analyzing for a theory class has modulated, but the key signature hasn't changed. So those notes are then added. So for example, you see A flat here, A flat here. Those flats get added in. So possibility number 1, you're looking at an excerpt from a larger work, and the larger work is in the appropriate key signature, but the section you're looking at is not. That's one option. I'm not sure that that's the case with this Bach chorale, especially if you look at that website of Bach chorale pieces. So another possibility is that we're dealing with publishers back in 18th century. And sometimes they had strange conventions. Sometimes they might have made a mistake. It's possible. One of the things I did when I was doing my doctoral work was take a class that dealt with primary sources. Like, how do you know that's what Bach wanted? It's not in his handwriting. It was by a publisher. Could the publisher have made a mistake? Yeah, there are publishers and sheet music out there that have printed mistakes. So just because you see a publisher publish that music doesn't mean that it's 100% accurate. So there's actually a lot more legwork necessary to really get to the bottom of, like, is it a publishing mistake? Is there a musical reason? Is it, so I'm not sure why it has 2 flats. But when we analyze it, this is why our music theory is helpful, because we can analyze it and come to the right answer, the right conclusions of what we need. So moving on to the second question, the example where this beginning section was analyzed in the key of E flat, is that a mistake? The answer is yes. That's a mistake. It is clearly in C minor. Let's analyze this. Let's break it down, right? So we look here. Our key signature, as we know, is not going to help us. It's a little confusing. But we see that it's a C minor triad. C, C, E flat, G. And this is where sometimes using lead sheet symbols can be very helpful, because you're not committing Roman numeral analysis. You have to know what key you're in to be able to do that. And if you're uncertain of what key you're in, just analyze the chord. What is that triad? And put in a lead sheet symbol. If we go here to the second beat, it's a C minor triad with E flat in the bass. We go to beat 3, it is a B diminished triad with D in the bass. Here we have a C minor triad in root position. And if you really want to improve your music theory skills, you can pause now and continue to do the analysis on your own. And don't wait, because I'm doing this pretty quickly. If it takes you a little longer, which would be understandable, pause the video, complete, and then see if you got it correctly. See how long it takes you, see how quickly you can analyze it. But I'm going to keep going forward right now. So here we have a G major triad with B in the bass. Here we go back to a C minor triad. And then we have a cadence here on a G major triad. And I know that this here is a suspension. I can see that it's resolving here on beat 4. That C is a 4/3 suspension. So after that cadence, we move on to another C minor triad, C minor triad again. These are passing tones here on the and of 2, going to A flat, C, F, F. That's an F minor triad with A flat in the bass. On beat 4, we have the A flat carrying over, so we still count that A flat, C, A flat, E flat. That's an A flat major triad. Going to F, C, A flat, D. That's a D half diminished 7 with F in the bass. Going to a G major triad. Going to C minor triad. So we analyze those chords. And let's say we're uncertain. Should we analyze this in C minor or should we analyze this in E flat major? This one, there's no doubt. Because we start on a C minor, we end on C minor here, and the excerpt continues, right? That's longer this, but this is enough for us to figure out. There's a cadence on a G, 1-5-1. I mean, that's the foundation of harmony. It makes complete sense. So if we analyze it in C minor, 1 chord, 1-6, 7, diminished 6, 1, 5-6, 1, 5. 7 diminished is really functioning like a dominant function. It's almost the same thing. We're basically 1-5, 1-5, 1. It's super basic harmonic progression. We continue. We go 1 chord, 1 chord. We then go to a 4-6 chord. It then becomes a 6 chord major. Then 2 half diminished 6-5, 5-1. Again, harmonic progressions that we expect. If you need to brush up on your harmonic progressions, I have a lesson about all of the expected harmonic progressions that you can review. But let's say you're doing your music theory homework late at night. You haven't slept in 20 hours. Your brain's crazy, but you're still trying to get your homework done. And you're like, I think it's E flat major. Let's just see what would happen, right? And this is what Andrew was referring to when he looked on YouTube for an analysis, for a recording, and found this analysis. You'd have to label that as a 6 chord, right? So starting with a 6 chord, that's a little bit unusual, but possible, right? So then we go to 6, 6. This right here, I'm going to put this in red because that's a red flag. If you've watched my videos, you know that a 6 chord is almost never an inversion. It's almost always in root position. So as soon as you see a 6 chord in an inversion, red lights should start going off, and you should start thinking something might be wrong here. I'm not saying that it never happens. It does, but it's definitely the exception. And if you can find something that is more common, that's probably the right answer. But let's keep going. We then get to a 7 diminished 6. This is not even in the key of E flat major, right? And on the video Andrew was mentioning, they label it as a sharp 5, which is not what you would actually label it as. You would label it as a 7 diminished 6 of B going to C of 6. It would be a secondary function, right? So 7 diminished 6 of 6, going back to 6. This is just so much 6, and you you would not find this progression. And then you would have to go to this another secondary function, 5/6 of 6 to 6 to 5 of 6. You know, when you have all this secondary functions of 6, of 6, of 6, of 6, it's because it's tonic. It's not functioning like 6. And this is something to really keep in mind, is how does something function? How does it work? And let me just break this down a little bit more for you. It's very important to remember when you're studying music theory, how it sounds is your foundation versus a kind of artificial intellectual exercise, which is what analyzing this in E flat major is. I mean, we can do it, and theoretically we can say, oh yeah, look, we analyzed it. But it's artificial because it's not the way human beings actually hear this. And that's like a word of advice is like to be aware that sometimes when you're looking at stuff theoretically, you can kind of go down the rabbit hole where it's just this artificial intellectual construct that has no connection with the reality of sound. Because you're talking about the reality of sound, we're talking about acoustics, we're talking about human perception and human psychology. And so that then starts overlapping into aesthetics, like how human beings hear and understand art. And when we talk about music theory has to be in service of identifying those things that are happening, because music is to help, is to create inspires emotions. And if we're detached from how those sounds make actual human beings feel, we're missing the boat. Of course, listening is key, so let's listen to just the beginning of this piece. And as a disclaimer, I'm not a pianist, I'm not a good pianist, I'm a saxophone player, that's my primary instrument. But to be a good musician, I have to have piano skills at least good enough so that I can play through these harmonies. And I present that as a great challenge for you all as well. If you don't have those piano skills, start trying to play through this music on a piano so that you can really use your ear and combine your theory with your ear. So here we go. And the other aspect is what's useful. And it's almost like you're developing music theory should be like a scientific formula. So as a composer or an arranger, you might have a moment of inspiration where you hear something, a feeling, sounds that create a certain feeling, and you start writing it down. And unless your piece of music is really very, very short, chances are inspiration will run out before the piece is done, before the piece is over. And you will then need to rely on craftsmanship to finish the piece. Also, just because you have an inspirational moment doesn't mean that it's fully formed. I mean, some people, might be able to do that, like Mozart. And sometimes even he would just sit and think about the music and try to imagine it in his mind and change and tweak how the things were going. So there's still some craftsmanship involved. And this is where you want to have good music theory, because good music theory can say, here's what you have, analyze it, let's see what's going on, and then what things do you know that would be a good way to complete that from the music you've already studied? What are the principles behind that? What's the formula? And so that's something to really keep in mind. This leads to another similar aspect in terms of understanding the repertoire of the music of any style you write in, whether that, this is Bach, so understanding that history is very important, especially if you're going to write in this style. But if you're going to write in electronic music style. You need to understand what is the idioms, what are the music theory characteristics, what are the other musical characteristics that make that style unique. So to develop good taste, and this is something that they talked about a lot in the Baroque era, and the best way to do that is listen to the greats, the people who have come before you, and listen to everything. So usually there's some kind of consensus. If you look at a music history book, pretty much everyone says Bach was a great composer and here were some of his greatest pieces. You should listen to those pieces. You should listen to all the things that, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven. If you're in that classical style, you need to listen to that music. And keep in mind that not only is there kind of a consensus about who are the great composers and which are the great pieces by those composers, but also about what performance. And this is something that's really, can be particularly unique to classical music, but is also really unique to pop music. If you think about a contemporary pop artist and then have someone else do their songs, the performance is going to be really different, and the effect musically and emotionally was going to be really, really different. In classical music, even though it's all written out, how it's performed can make a huge difference in how it feels. So you want to then have a sense of who are the best performers. And YouTube is awesome, Spotify is awesome. I love all these platforms. But there's with everything, there are pitfalls. And one of the pitfalls is sometimes not every performance on YouTube is a great performance. And if you don't haven't developed a discerning taste to be able to tell the difference between a good performance and a bad performance, you could then start putting into your mind and your subconscious music that's not very good or not well performed. So you just want to be aware of that and be aware of what it is, what the standard is. Now, sometimes when I tell students to do this, they say, Dr. B, I don't want to listen to all that music because, then I'm going to lose my individuality and anything I write is not going to be very original. I'm just going to write like all these things that I've listened to it. And I kind of shake my head. I understand that concern. That's only a real concern if you are a blind follower with no opinions. So if you just, absorb things, don't think about it, don't consider it, and then just regurgitate it, then yes, by listening to Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, you would just regurgitate what you've absorbed. But what I tell my students to do is have an opinion. Listen to all this great music, but do not be afraid of saying, I like this, I don't like this. You'll have the knowledge of knowing what's considered great, high art, whatever, but you do not lose your individual tastes and what makes you you. And after you listen to tens of thousands of hours of music, and at each point deciding what you like about it and what you don't like about it, and then you say, I'm just going to write a piece with just the stuff I like, taken from all that thousands of pieces of music that you heard, that unique combination of what you like will be original. That's amazing. So you don't, as long as you're willing to have an opinion, you do not need to fear losing your individuality and your originality by listening to the greats and listening to the masters. So all of that is maybe a little bit of a tangent to what Andrew's question was, but developing that bigger perspective of what sounds right, how do you figure out what sounds right, and how that process, how you would undergo developing that process. So I try to always find pieces I haven't listened to. I always try to challenge my ear, listen to something new, and then have an opinion on that. A lot of the stuff I love music. I love lots of music in many different styles. Some stuff I don't like. In some of the stuff I don't like, I realize it's well constructed and it's musically valid, but it's just doesn't reach me personally. So when I go to compose something, I only compose the stuff that I really like, that excites me. And so that's I think a good approach to dealing with this. All right. Thank you very much, folks. Take a look. I hope to be having these videos coming back on a regular basis, and I hope you're enjoying them. Thanks so much.